Hey, I'm Rick Kaplan. Welcome to Top Shelf Barbecue, and this is how to smoke barbecue pork ribs. We're gonna go over what to look for in a rack of ribs, how to prep your ribs, how to season your ribs, smoking and wrapping your ribs, checking temperatures and what temperatures to look for, and the final smoke to set your sauce and create an awesome crust. You're gonna need some stuff for this. So first thing, a rack of ribs, a sheet pan, some plastic wrap, and aluminum foil, some scissors, some tongs, paper towels, a sauce brush, an oven mitt or heat resistant gloves, a fillet knife or boning knife, and a chef's knife. Seasonings, butter, apple cider vinegar, a Thermopen, and a smoker. Okay, here I've got some pork loin back ribs, and if you take a look at this, you can see a whole bunch of marbling and good fat content throughout this whole thing. Usually you only find this on the spare ribs, but spare ribs you're gonna have to trim up. Back ribs are usually a little bit thicker. They got a little bit more meat on them. But if you ever go to the store and you see something that looks like this, get it. This is awesome. Put it in the freezer, cook it later, but this is really good. All this fat content marbling throughout this piece of meat. So first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna keep things clean. I've already washed my hands. Bringing out some plastic wrap. Gonna go ahead and open up our ribs. Now what I'm doing is I'm gonna season this the night ahead of time, but you can do this right before you start smoking, that's okay. The thing that I like to keep as a rule of thumb is these should go on the smoker cold, so right from the fridge. If you let them get to room temp, you might not get as much smoke penetration. Smoke likes to penetrate meat when it's cold. So go ahead and open this up. Now, you wanna check it, make sure it's not slimy. It could be wet, like a little wet, but not like slimy, sticky. And then go ahead and smell it. If you can smell a little hint of it, that's okay, but the smell should go away after like 2 seconds of you continually smelling it. If it's lingering around or if it's like really, really bad, get rid of it. Just throw it away or return it to the store. So I'm gonna go ahead and toss that. Now, some ribs come with the membrane off. Most of them have the membrane still on. So, what I'm gonna do is I like to rip from the big side to the small side. Now sometimes this is cut right here and you can grab a lip, or we can actually see the lip of the membrane right here. The membrane is this this kind of white film that you see on top of it. It's this right here. So there's a couple ways to do this. You can stick a knife in between here and try to poke your way through, which I usually have some kind of issue with. What I like to do is the paper towel method, but I've got a little bit different. I have 2 paper towels. So that way I can hold on to this wet piece of meat and then kind of pull away. That way you have grip on everything. And you know, sometimes this happens. It's gonna rip like that. It doesn't always come off perfect the first time, but when it does, you feel pretty lucky. I'm having some trouble with this end, so I'm just gonna go ahead and flip it around and start with the other end. Grab some fresh paper towels. I'm gonna kind of dry this off. The drier the better, and always use the 2 paper towels. So we're gonna go from the small side to the big side. So try to grab this right here, and you're just pinching it and pulling it. And try to make sure that it comes up in one sheet. You can see how this is torn right here. So re-grab it to try to grab the entire thing all in one stroke. Yeah, I think we're good. And then you should be able to pull it off all in one fell swoop. Almost. All right, pretty good there. Now, if you want to trim these up and keep them pretty, I actually recommend it. One of the best knives for this is a boning knife. It's nice and skinny, and this just slides through meat. If you're trying to prep chickens or just cut off these little nuggets here, this thing works perfect. A chef's knife, you're gonna have to work it a little bit. They're a little bit thicker. This is designed for cleaning up meat. So anything that you see hanging out, just get rid of it. It's just gonna burn up during our cook time. Got a little bone there. I'm happy with this side, don't need to do anything to it. So we're gonna put it on the bottom side up. So what we just took the membrane off is facing up. I'm gonna wash my hands. These are the main seasonings that I use. If you want to go basic, you could just do salt and pepper. And I've got kosher salt and coarse ground black pepper. And one thing that you want to do to kick the flavor up a notch is use Hawaiian sea salt. They use this for Hawaiian pork, which is Kahlua pork. And this stuff is amazing. This adds different depth to the flavor of the salt that you just can't find anywhere else. And I think bringing that to the ribs is a really great addition. The other thing that you want to do to beef up the flavor is going to be some MSG, monosodium glutamate. This stuff, if you're not afraid to use it, will kick the flavor up and increase the flavor of the ribs exponentially. You don't have to use a lot. You know, there's some old wives' tales that it's not the best for you, but a little bit can't hurt. And this also helps with smoke rings. So if you're trying to get a smoke ring to impress your friends, this can help out with that. So I'm gonna go with some of the MSG. I'm gonna load on a little bit of this coarse Hawaiian sea salt, but I don't wanna go too much because this stuff is really thick. And as it melts, it's gonna cover the pork. So we're also going to put on 2 of my favorite rubs. So I've got Killer Hogs, the barbecue rub. This stuff is awesome. You could use just this and the ribs will turn out great every time. So I'm gonna go ahead and get a good sprinkling of that. It's okay to go slightly heavy with your seasoning. And you're only gonna figure this out with time, how much to use. The second one that I like to use is Famous Dave's Rib Rub. I'm not too into their sauce, but their rib rub is pretty amazing in my opinion. You could use just this stuff and ribs will turn out great every time. So we're gonna do about the same amount of that. Go ahead and press the seasoning into the meat. Now if you want, you can go ahead and season these edges here. It's not 100% necessary. I usually just finish that off with one of these rib rub seasonings. Okay, now take your black pepper. Go ahead and I like to go heavy with this. When you smoke black pepper and heat it up and add that smoke flavor, it really cuts down on the heat. So you can go kind of heavy. Now what I'm doing when I'm grabbing this, I get a 4-finger pinch. Just grab a nice forefinger and then you just twist your fingers together and it'll slowly release the grains. So that's a good way to put it on in a nice even swoop. And go ahead and pat that in. All right, we got our pepper. Let's go ahead and flip it. A little bit of MSG. Let's go some more of the Hawaiian salt. Now obviously if you were just using salt and pepper, you would go a lot heavier with the salt. pretty much like the same as if you were salting a steak, possibly a little bit more. Okay, now we're going to do killer hogs. Famous Dave's. Go ahead and smash that in. I like to smash in this rub to kind of push it into the meat, and then it picks up some of the moisture and it gets a little sticky, and that helps the pepper stay on. So that's why I like to do the pepper last, after I've smashed in my other rubs. Again, going a little heavy on the pepper. You almost want it to look like it's too much. And just trust me, it'll come out amazing when you're done. Everyone's gonna love it. If you don't love it, you don't know what you're talking about. Go ahead and mash that in. Okay, now we're ready to fold this up. All right, close this lip here. Like I said, these are gonna sit in the fridge overnight. So these flavors are gonna meld into our meat and make it that much more tasty when we go to eat them. That's pretty good. Make sure that we have good seal. Oh. Bring this over. Again, make sure you have a good seal, make sure everything's tucked. Okay, now this is pretty good, but it's not good enough. If you took this and put that in the fridge just like that, it's gonna leak all over. So if you have a tub to put this in, cool, roll with that. We're going to go ahead and wrap this one more time. And when you place that in the fridge, make sure you place it on the bottom, as close to the bottom as you can get. That way, if it does leak, it doesn't leak all over everything. It just leaks on the bottom or what's below it. Okay, same thing. Create a little pocket. Now I feel a lot happier with that. The plastic wrap sticks to itself, so having a second layer makes it easier. All right, there we go. I'm a lot happier with that. So this is gonna go in the fridge overnight, and then we will go ahead and smoke these tomorrow. All right, we got our smoker rolling at 225. So I'm thinking 225 is the minimum you wanna go for ribs, 250 about the max. You definitely wanna keep it above 215, which is what we're gonna need to bring this up to temp, because we wanna get this to about 205. So I'm just gonna go ahead and set this on here. Oh. Let's get our grill grate on. Okay. So we're gonna set our ribs on. Now these were pretty marbled, so I really don't have to worry about spritzing. And honestly, if you do it this way, you don't really need to spritz anyway. So it'll help us develop a little bit more of a crust, but if you're wrapping ribs, your crust is not going to turn out very crispy anyway. We're actually going to create a crust at the end by applying our barbecue sauce and letting that set. So we've got these on. I don't even want to look at them for an hour and a half, so we're just going to close the lid, and then we'll come back in an hour and a half and we'll check them with a temperature probe. Check for temperature. We want to see about 160, 165, and then we're going to wrap them with some apple cider vinegar, maybe some extra seasoning, and then some barbecue sauce if you want. So we'll come back to this in about an hour and a half and check temp. All right, I'm here with my trusty dusty Thermopro, and one way to check to make sure this works is boil some water. Dip this into the boiling water and it should read right around 212. So I just checked this one yesterday, so it is good. We're rolling around at 250. That's okay. That's within our margin of error. And you can see it's starting to form a little bit of a crust here. It's still firm to the touch. Delicious. Let's go ahead and check our temp. I'm gonna go in between the bones here. So see the bones right there? Let's just go in between them and get a feel for the temp on the meat. We're at 158. So that's a perfect time to pull these guys. So I'm gonna go ahead and prep our foil wrap, and then I'm gonna come out here and grab these ribs, and then we're gonna wrap them inside. All right, we've got our prep ready. Check this out. Got my tongs to pull the ribs off of the smoker, and I have 2 sheets of foil on a sheet pan. So if you just wrap your ribs with 1 piece of foil, it's usually gonna tear. So if the ribs are facing any which way and the bones touch any of this foil, it usually tears it. I don't know how, but it almost always does. Creates a little leak point, and then juices are going to start flowing everywhere. So if you have 2, keep it contained. 2 is safe. And then what I've got here is I've got some of this barbecue sauce. This is one of my favorites, Uncle Bub's. You can use whatever you want. Got some apple cider vinegar, and I've got butter. This is Irish butter, so it is a little more delicious than your regular average butter, but I recommend using butter instead of any of that fake stuff. It's better for you and it just tastes better. So we're gonna go ahead and put these ribs on. All right, we're gonna go ahead and pull our ribs off. Now there's a small side and a big side, and usually on the big side the bones curve up more, so you have a space to put your tongs in to pick it up. Go ahead and slide them under there. Grab it. Transfer it. There we go. All right, these look perfect. They're just tearing in some spots. So that's about the maximum that this outside can handle before it starts getting really dry and cracked out. So what we're gonna do here, I'm gonna go ahead and put a couple pads of butter. This is gonna melt while it's in this little pocket of aluminum foil, and it's gonna steam and just kind of separate the butter into all the little corners and crevices. It's gonna come out amazing. You can do this without butter, but it's not as good. Guaranteed. 100%. I'm gonna go ahead and give us a little squirt on here. Don't need too much right now. Let's go ahead and flip this. We're going to be cooking meat side down. So the meat is going to be marinating in all the juices, and the bones are going to be up here. And usually, like I said, the bones will create tears in your aluminum foil wrapper. So if they're pointing up, there's less chance of creating tears. So I like to have them pointing up. A little more butter on top. Some more sauce. You can use more butter if you want than that. That's just all I had available right now. That was at room temp, and I don't want to put any cold butter on this for the moment. You can do that. You could use cold butter. That's fine. Make sure you use a decent amount of apple cider vinegar, and this is just going to steam in here and break down all the muscle tissues, and all the fat is going to render. It's going to turn out great. What I like to do is bring the two edges together, fold them over like that, and then bring your sides up and kind of fold them over and do the same thing here. Make sure you get in the middle. Bring these together, fold them, sides up. This will minimize any drippage. All right, that's it. We're gonna go ahead, put these back on the smoker, and then we're gonna come back in about 2 to 3 hours, probably around 2 hours, just to check it. And we're gonna take our little thermometer, and then we're gonna feel where these bones are, stick in between, get a big feeling for the meat, and check to see what our temp is. We wanna get this up to 205. That's our point when we pull it. 205 is perfect. If you're at 200, they're not really done enough. If you're at 210, they're gonna be falling apart a little too much. So 205 is just perfect. And once you get a feel for this, you'll be able to lift these up and they'll bend down. They'll bend around your hand. Right now it doesn't really bend at all. So you'll feel it start to bend. That happens at about 200. That's when it starts bending. 203 is when it starts getting really awesome. Those fibers start breaking down, the fat's all rendered. 205 for me is like perfect, and that's consistent between most of the racks of ribs that I've done. You do want to go by feel. So if you push this in, you feel any resistance, I'm not talking about hitting a bone, but going through the meat, if you feel any resistance, that means they're not done yet. You just keep them on the smoker a little bit longer. What you want to do is be able to stick this through, and it should feel like you're poking through a room temperature stick of butter. So that's the feeling you should get from this. But 205 is an amazing temperature. I haven't run into a rack of ribs that didn't turn out great when I pulled it at 205. So let's go ahead and put these back on the grill. There we go, cooking away. I closed up some of the vents down here and bring our temp closer to 225. We want it to come up to temp more slowly. The reason for this is it gives more time for those muscle tissues and fat to break down before it gets to the temperature where it just starts falling apart. So we want that fat to render and get out of the way and kind of melt into everything, rather than having all those muscle fibers and tissues breaking down the collagen, breaking down, so that we have a better piece of meat that's all the fat's rendered. Because if you've got chunks of fat left on your meat, it's going to be a little weird. We just want to get that all rendered and tasting good. So there we go. All right, we've been rolling at about 220 degrees. I just raised the temperature up to try to get it up to 225, maybe to 230, but it's time to check our temperature. So let's go ahead and do that. So you want to try to get in between some of the bones here. So you just try and feel around if you can. This thing's good. That's going in pretty good. Oh, look at that, we're at 209. It's time to pull. We went just a little bit over, but that's okay. Just gonna check temp in a couple extra places. It's going in nice like butter. We got 180. Let's flip it. $195, 190. Let's do that bend test. See, they're not bending a whole lot. So we're almost there. Let's go ahead and put it back on. You want to try to sneak up on this temperature of like 203 to 205. And when you do that, these are going to come out perfect. Checking temps again. Right there. 198. 205. 195. It's going in like butter on some spots. In other spots, still a little. You know what? It's good enough. I don't want to overdo some spots. Having it right at about 200 in some spots is okay. So we are going to unwrap this, apply some barbecue sauce, and then put them back on the grill for a little bit. So here's how I like to do that. That's looking pretty good. I'll just take it, flip it on. See that? Went a little bit too long. Over here it's pretty good. Meat was a little thinner on that side. So that's why that happened. I'm gonna go ahead and just cut this off. So we've got all our structure over here. And this way, you can grab from under here to put it back on the grill. Time to put our sauce on. Go ahead and slather that on. Get it on pretty thick. And then back onto the grill. Try to be careful not to let this thing break. Here we go. Okay, we're gonna leave that on there for about 10 minutes, and that should give this enough time to set up. Come back, check it out. If you want to, you can reapply, but I like to just do one coat. I found that if you reapply and give it more time on the grill after it's been unwrapped, it loses some moisture. So come back 10 minutes, check it out. We should be good to go. Yeah, sauce is pretty well set on here. I'm happy with that. Let's attack it from this angle. There we go. Look at that bend. These are perfect. All right, before we dig in, we're gonna let these rest for about 5 minutes. Should Should be long enough. And then we'll crack them open and see what we got. So an easier way to cut these is to flip this. And we're gonna do it from this side. I just like to cut along every bone. There's no point in trying to get it half and half. These bones curve. That's just crazy talk. So just cut right down the bone. I'm trying not to put too much pressure on this blade because I'm cutting on the sheet pan. There we go. That's good enough to get a middle piece. Look at that. Still got a little moisture in there. Nice smoke ring. Pulls off the bone, doesn't fall off the bone. I'll save that for the dog. We're gonna take the next one. All right, here we go. That's good. So there's tons of flavor around the outside and it kind of seeps into the middle, but you get so much pork flavor right in there that we got the perfect amount of seasoning on here. Got a nice bite to it, but it's not chewy. The meat just gives between your teeth. That's what you're looking for. Not a pot roast. Ribs. Look at that. Clean. Amazing. Every time. Just follow those directions. You're good to go.